shall make it stay, make it strong. From barriers to breakthrough, we stand with pride. Sedulous collective, we're by your side. Always.
I have Dr. Alya Khan. Dr. Alya Khan from London Metropolitan University. Great to have meeting her for the second time today, actually. We've met before, which is lovely. Dr. Alya is a senior lecturer in health ethics, something which is dear to our thoughts and our hearts. And so tonight, the quote that she's given us to springboard into her lightning talk is, what is needed to harness the promise and potential of participatory social research and projects, aiming for emancipatory social change? Big question. In this talk, I will draw on my experiences of collaborative and oral history projects to explore the ethics and politics of trust and care for meaningful co-production. And I just love every part of that quote because it speaks to so much of what's missing, which is that when we talk about being a collective or co-producing or whatever, how many voices are in the room? Who's listening to them? What's coming out of this? Who cares about how many boxes we tick? We are connecting as humans.
So I would also like to thank Sedulous so much for inviting me to speak, for meeting with me, and for introducing me to the other speakers and bringing us all together here today. This is such an important event, I think, in so many ways, to have these conversations openly and to share our ideas and learn from each other. My talk is called Trust and Care, the Ethics and Politics of Participatory Research. I work in a university, so I am a senior lecturer. I teach on the Health and Social Care undergraduate degree, I teach on the Public Health Master's degree, and my specialism or expertise, or whatever you want to call it, what I trained in was ethics and politics, and particularly applied ethics. Professional ethics is a lot of what I teach. My background is in philosophy, so I studied this very theoretical, abstract kind of subject from undergraduate, postgraduate and other postgraduate degrees. But I was always kind of talking to people about, well, what can we do with all these ideas that we're having and all this mental gymnastics that we're performing, and what does it mean for people, for society, so we're looking at a lot of hypothetical examples, case studies in philosophy. We work with paradoxes and different kinds of problems, how do we solve them? And I thought, well, I really, from a very young age, wanted to, from the undergraduate degree, wanted to see, well, what difference can it make out there? Can't we work with what's actually happening to people? And in part, it came about because of my own background. And I've got a mixed ethnicity background. My parents came from other countries, on the second generation, and they were working class and they struggled, and I sort of grew up in that environment. And I was, did well at school, got into uni, but my family background meant a lot to me in terms of how might I serve the community that I came from to improve lives. At the university, sort of teaching students, I work at a widening participation university. It has a strong mission to work with, look at social justice. So it's very much, we have an education for social justice framework. It means that we try to make sure that our pedagogy is really kind of inclusive and really kind of addressing everyone who's in the room and bringing in as many people who want to come and study at the university into the room. I started out doing some research, so I joined with a colleague looking at the awarding gap. So that's the gap that some of you might know about between black and white students who enter the university with the same potential and the same initial qualifications or whatever, but leave with this big differential. The white students were always doing better. The black students were not getting those firsts and 2-1s. Why? What was happening? So I started doing some oral history work with the students. to talk to them about their experiences of the university, of the degree they're studying on. So the idea of the hidden curriculum, what is it that not all of you are getting that will help you succeed to get the outcomes that you want at university. And I was introduced to the oral history method by a colleague. I did the training with the Oral History Society, and I was hooked at that approach to understanding the lived experiences of others. It's a very open, so in social science, a lot of qualitative research involves structured or semi-structured interviews, which means you have a set of questions or themes or topics. Oral history starts from asking people what they want to talk about. Well, first of all, do you want to talk to me? We're doing a project on this. What do you want to talk about? And having that conversation really at the level of the person that you're talking to, and letting it go wherever they want it to go. And recording it for preservation as well, to add to the historical record. So this is what I thought was really important about oral history, was also to ask people if they would be willing to not be anonymised, to put their name, so it's going to go into the historical record. That is so important, I think, when we're talking about lived experiences being taken on board in policy. We need to kind of show the validity of the stories that people are telling about their experiences by being able to identify who we're talking about. Not everyone wants to do that, of course, but we found that many did come forward. So the students came forward, we impacted the policy at the university by taking on board what exactly people were saying they needed and what was missing from their courses. The first slide here, I'm stuck on the first slide, the eggs there, sort of trying to hatch new ways of, what do we do to kind of support and encourage the hatching of the new ways, the new insights that we might develop, what elements really can support the realisation of authentic collaboration in community research. So I was working with students. How did I go about reaching out to them? I had a utopian ideal of, want to improve their lives and make sure they get as good degrees as possible. But actually I began to realise that, that's an ideal, but we're working in the real world with real world problems. It's non-ideal. We've got to look at what's actually happening for people. And maybe those utopias might be out of reach. Yeah, we might want to kind of aim towards them: full equality, non-discrimination, anti-oppressive practice, leading to complete eradication of all forms of inequality and oppression. But actually, when we're working with real people, with each other, at that human level, what really matters is understanding that we affect each other, we impact each other. So when I'm talking about oral history, it's about building stories together in a collaborative conversation. So I'm really interested in trust building and what that actually means. So we're talking about building trustful relations. It starts, I think, with self-trust. So that means us being really reflexive. So that idea of cultural humility that was being spoken about in the last talk, I'm really interested in that too. So really being very reflexive, questioning myself, why am I doing this research? What are my values? And then building trust with others from my standing point of my own self-trust. And thinking about who, when we're talking about the community and the public, what do we mean by those concepts too? So I was initially working with students. I then have gone on to do lots of community work outside of the university with local communities in London, particularly in Islington where the university is situated, but also the wider London population too. But really thinking about, there's this sort of sense of divide between us and them. We're the experts in the university, we're coming out to, even when talking about having those oral history conversations that are built on coming down to a level of one-to-one conversations, open conversations. Nevertheless, there's still this sense of that's the community out there, the underserved, the hard to reach. But actually, I'm also, so this is the reflexivity bit, I'm also a member of the community in some sense. Right? I'm also a participant in this research or this study that we're doing. What I say is also part of what is being collected. So I don't want to be an anonymous kind of, the objective kind of expert who's got a fly on the wall, kind of observing everyone. I'm also in here too. So the researcher as an insider-outsider is something that's been discussed a lot in social research. I'm going to talk about a project that I led in a moment where that we sort of really tried to break down that boundary between the insider and the outsider, the expert and the researched. I've got cultural humility. I'm not going to talk about that again, but I totally kind of think that's a very important idea. I also think care is extremely important. When I say the ethics and politics of care, I mean both the kind of moral imperative to think about how we're treating others, being compassionate and caring and supportive, etc. But also how that sits in the political kind of realm of trying to make social change, transform people's lives. How can it be sort of formalised in a sense as something that should be part of every project that's trying to work towards egalitarianism, that's trying to work towards a much more equal society than we currently have. So again, that focus on ourselves as the researchers, who are we? What does it mean to be caring? And we also, in the projects that I've worked on, we've talked quite a lot about Kimberly Crenshaw's idea of intersectionality and how that connects with care. So really sort of thinking about how different axes of power might impact each of us, and depending on where we stand, we're affected in different ways by all forms of discrimination and inequality. And that's related if we're going to look through an intersectional lens at what people are talking about when they engage in research with us, we need to add in that idea of care of people's stories, however complex they are, however they're affected, understood through intersectionality. And I think love, that I haven't got that on the slide, but love must come into play too. So those of you aware of the black feminist theorist Bell Hooks, she speaks about love as a part of any process that is kind of looking for emancipatory change. This is the project that I wanted to talk about. So this is a big project that I did, started in 2021, just towards the end of, there was a lockdown actually, and we started out doing interviews online. There's a whole story I could tell you about that. It's called Meanings of Home. So I was lucky enough to be working in an institution that, so a lot of the time colleagues are sort of trying to get money from the funding bodies, the Research England, right? So they're looking for money from out there. The university funded me with this one. So I had internal rescaling funds to support the project. Meanings of Home in communities of African, Caribbean, South Asian, Latin American and mixed backgrounds in London. I had black hair then. And the quote there is one of the teams. So the team here is made up of academics, professional services staff, so staff working in the university in student services, and students. No one had done oral history before, so we started out by training, or offering people the training. So they were trained in oral history methods. We had an expert trainer come in to help us. And the students were on undergraduate degrees. And so we were really thinking about, so it says here, we were a group of academics, professional services staff and students at London Met, ourselves all from racially minoritised backgrounds, who've come together across our shared interest in decolonial research methodologies to record and relate untold stories of home amongst marginalised communities in our city. So this decolonial, what do I mean by that? So this is a much contested term. Even the very possibility of decolonising anything is questionable, and I would say it is questionable. But we wanted to take a decolonial approach, meaning we were looking at the legacies of colonialism and how they've impacted different generations of racially minoritized people living in London. And we wanted to hear from people themselves, if they wanted to speak to us. We generated this idea amongst us. This is what the team wanted to work on. So we thought, well, we're starting from the beginning of research design and topic with decolonial approach. So it's not led by the experts. It was led by the students actually had most of the ideas, to be honest with you. And some of the colleagues here, one of them, so my colleague who's standing at the front here in the blue cardigan, she came from biomedical science. She'd never done any social research before, but she had lived experience herself of Islamophobia and other things that affected her in her life. So she wanted to be part of the project. So we were really keen on doing something. This was unusual in the university. This is why they funded us, actually, because they said, yeah, you know, this is going to be hopefully productive and interesting and important and might have an impact that is going to make some difference. We also, part of oral history is we usually want to preserve. So this is creating a resource for others, a public archive of all the recordings. And all the recordings are interviews, so we chose to interview people from our own networks. So often in social research, recruitment means, you know, who are the underserved people out there, and let's go and try, and then finding them hard to reach and all of that. Here we were like, well, we're going to do this differently. We're going to talk to people we already know, who we think might want to talk to us and might have something to say. So they're from our own communities, hence the groups that we spoke to. So the fact we spoke to African, Caribbean, South Asian, Latin American was because that's who we were. These were our networks. This is something different. It's challenging a lot of norms in social research to do it like this. We can maybe talk about this during the question time, about how we approach that. And so this is part of our understanding of us building a decolonial method in research. We did photography as well. So we did we worked with a professional photographer actually, who spoke to the participants and about their ideas of home and belonging, and the photographs of them, some of them in their own homes. I haven't got them with me today, I've got a whole massive deck of them, but if you're interested actually in finding out more about the project, there's a link there on this slide, maybe that will go out later to see some of the things we've generated. We're doing all the kind of usual academic stuff, right, so writing articles and, but you know, those kind of things go somewhere and are not shared widely. So it's only the other academics who are reading that stuff. The archive, though, that's going to be open to everyone. And we're going to take it out there for all to see. I'm not sure how much time we've got left.
You're okay.
Keep going.
3 minutes.
So oral history is about valorising voices from below. That's the tradition in oral history, relating unheard stories. So, you know, this is about adding to the historical record, as I said, so that people can't say, well, we didn't know, because, you know, it didn't say that in the history books, so we're adding it. We aim to develop an inclusive approach together. So the thing is that we were designing how we did things together. What did we learn? Trust building is slow, and it has to be continuous. It doesn't happen overnight. There were hiccups along the way, amongst us as researchers, and between us and participants. So we didn't always agree on how we were proceeding, and you know, sometimes we had to stop, sometimes also there were issues of time. People didn't always have time to do as much as they wanted to do, so that included colleagues, and some of my colleagues in professional services would have loved to do more interviews, but the challenges of their jobs meant they couldn't, they weren't released from them for as long as they wanted to. Funding, you know, we had that initial funding from the university, and that's great. We'd like to do more, we'd like to grow the project. We ended up with 18, the interviews are in-depth and very, very long, they're like 2-3 hours long. We'd like to do more, but you know, we need funds. This is an issue. Also, the expectations in academia to put your scholarship into journals so that you can participate in what's called the Research Excellence Framework that the government runs every 4 years. That means that we then get perhaps more funding at our university to do. So there's a big focus on publishing, and that isn't always what everyone wants to do, like put things in journals that are not making the difference that we want to make. We wanted to talk to policymakers instead. So we want to do more of that. Co-production and shared authority. I want to say something about co-production, our understanding of co-production. It's about working together, trustfully, to arrive at a society of equals. And that co-production has to happen all the way through, from developing the research aim through to the design, the impact, ongoing impact as well. And I think it's really important also, from our point of view, to see scholars, those of us that have done PhDs and whatnot, to not be seen as experts, okay, but to perhaps be seen as mobilisers. Where we can help, that's what we want to do. This project, as I said, it worked really well. People are still talking about it, and they're still, as I said, wanting to do more. So if we can mobilise, if we can work together with those of you that are outside of the universities, because there's all this knowledge that's been generated, but what's happening to it? It needs to go out there and be shared much, much more. I believe I'm to time. Am I? Yes?
Yes, do you want to show your... That's the final.
My final slide. We're aiming to keep going, so we have foregrounded the idea of critical hope that we take from Audre Lorde, a black feminist thinker, poet, artist, disability rights worker, who says, you know, in times of difficult challenge, where things seem like they're not moving forward, it's really important if you can build solidarity with others, not doing things alone, working collectively, you can keep supporting each other, holding each other up, and maintain that critical hope and that vision that things can change. So committing to an ongoing process. I mean, I'm in it for the long term. And yeah, sort of really kind of working with others to build your sources of solidarity. The final slide's got a bunch of references of some of the things I've talked about, some of the theories I've mentioned. Yeah, thank you very much.